Hello everyone. My name is Willow and today I will talk to all of you about the Godzilla game and the movie. First, the game Godzilla, Save the Earth. Godzilla, Save the Earth is a fighting video game based on Toho's Godzilla franchise. It is developed by Pipeworks Software, published by Atari, and released in 2004 for PlayStation 2 and Xbox. The game is a sequel to 2002's Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters Melee, and was followed by Godzilla, Unleashed in 2007. The gameplay is identical to the previous game, although it plays at a more sluggish pace and allows monsters to use their beam attacks more frequently. New additions included elevated terrains, a challenge mode, online play, and a slightly more cohesive story mode that includes limited traveling sections and underwater levels. In addition to all 12 playable monsters from the previous game, Save the Earth introduced 6 new playable monsters: Baragon, Jet Jaguar, Megaguirus, Mogra, Mothra, and Space Godzilla. Bioland was also going to be included, as she was fully programmed into the game, but was cut due to licensing reasons. Save the Earth takes place 2 years after Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters Melee. The story involves mankind getting hold of Godzilla's DNA, known in the game as G-cells. The Vortok learn of this, once again returning to Earth, controlling a vast army of monsters, including their ultimate weapon, Space Godzilla. The player faces down many controlled monsters in different locations. In the climax cutscene, Godzilla confronts Space Godzilla in a final duel. Godzilla blasts off Space Godzilla's shoulder crystals, causing a black hole to form. Space Godzilla is sucked in and apparently killed, forcing the Vortok to retreat while Godzilla lets out a victorious roar, having saved the Earth yet again. Godzilla, Save the Earth received mixed reviews on both platforms according to video game review aggregator Metacritic. 1UP gave the game a boss score, saying, "Godzilla, Save the Earth is a fun game and a worthy sequel to Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters Melee. If it had been afforded a little more finesse, especially regarding the challenges, and a little more authentic Godzilla flavor, it'd be even sweeter." The fact is, though, that unless you're a Godzilla fan, there are better games of this general type out there. War of the Monsters and Def Jam, Fight for New York come to mind. Still, the kaiju in Godzilla's universe are way cooler than grown, sweaty men in tights. Personally, I liked this game. Me and Vice used to play this game a lot. And now for the film Godzilla. Godzilla is a 1998 American monster film directed and co-written by Roland Emmerich, produced by TriStar Pictures, Centropolis Entertainment, Fried Films, and Independent Pictures, and distributed by TriStar. It is a reboot of Toho Co. Limited's Godzilla franchise. It is also the 23rd film in the franchise and the first Godzilla film to be completely produced by a Hollywood studio. The film stars Matthew Broderick, Jean Reno, Maria Pitillo, Hank Azaria, Kevin Dunn, Michael Lerner, and Harry Shearer. The film is dedicated to Tomoyuki Tanaka, the co-creator and producer of various Godzilla films, who died in April 1997. In the film, authorities investigate and battle a giant monster who migrates to New York City to nest its young. In October 1992, TriStar announced plans to produce a trilogy of Godzilla films. In May 1993, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio were hired to write the script. In July 1994, Jan de Bont was announced as the director but left the project that December due to budget disputes. Emmerich was hired in May 1996 to direct and co-write a new script with producer Dean Devlin. Principal photography began in May 1997 and ended in September 1997. Godzilla was theatrically released on May 20, 1998, to negative reviews and grossed $379 million worldwide against a production budget between $130–150 million and marketing costs of $80 million, becoming the third highest grossing film of 1998. Despite turning a profit, it was considered a box office disappointment. 11–12, planned sequels were cancelled. but an animated series was produced instead. TriStar let their remake, sequel rights expire on May 20, 2003. In 2004, Toho began trademarking new iterations of TriStar's Godzilla as Zilla, with only the incarnations from the 1998 film and animated series retaining the Godzilla copyright, trademark. An iguana nest is exposed to the fallout of a military nuclear test in French Polynesia. Sometime later, a Japanese cannery vessel in the South Pacific Ocean is suddenly attacked by a giant creature, with only one fisherman surviving. While confined in a hospital in Tahiti, the traumatized survivor is visited by a mysterious Frenchman, who questions him over what he witnessed, wherein he repeatedly replies Gojira. Meanwhile, NRC scientist Dr. Nico Niktadopoulos is researching the effects of radiation on wildlife in the Chernobyl exclusion zone when he is interrupted by an official from the U.S. State Department who has come to pick him up for a special assignment. Nick is sent to Panama and Jamaica to study a trail of wreckage leading to another cannery ship with massive claw marks on it. Nick identifies skin samples he discovered in the shipwreck as belonging to an unknown species. He dismisses the military's theory of the creature being a living dinosaur, instead deducing it is a mutant created by nuclear testing. The creature travels to New York City, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. The city is evacuated before the U.S. military, on Nick's advice, lure the creature into revealing itself with a large pile of fish. Their attempt to kill it fails, however, and only causes further damage before it escapes. Nick collects a blood sample, and by performing a pregnancy test, discovers the creature reproduces asexually and is collecting food for its offspring. Nick also meets up with his ex-girlfriend, Audrey Timmons, a young aspiring news reporter. While she visits him, she uncovers a classified tape in his provisional military tent concerning the monster's origins and turns it over to the media. She hopes to have her report put on TV to launch her career, but her boss, Charles Kamen, uses the tape in his report, declaring it his own discovery, and dubs the creature Godzilla. As a result of the tape's disclosure, Nick is removed from the operation and he disowns Audrey, before being kidnapped by the mysterious Frenchman, who identified himself as Philippe Roche copyright, revealing himself as an agent of the French Secret Service. Philippe explains that he and his colleagues have been closely watching the events to cover up their country's role in the nuclear testing that created Godzilla. Suspecting a nest somewhere in the city, they cooperate with Nick to trace and destroy it. Meanwhile, Godzilla resurfaces and dives into the Hudson River to evade a second attempt by the military to kill it, where it is attacked by Navy submarines. After colliding with torpedoes, Godzilla sinks, believed to be dead by the authorities. Nick and Philippe's team, followed by Audrey and her cameraman Victor Animal Palotti, find the nest inside Madison Square Garden, with over 200 eggs. Before long, the eggs begin to hatch and the strike team are attacked by the offspring. Nick, Animal, Audrey and Philippe take refuge in the garden's broadcast booth and successfully send out a live news report to alert the military. A prompt response involving an airstrike is initiated as the four escape moments before the Air Force bomb the arena. Audrey and Nick reconcile, before the adult Godzilla, having survived, emerges from the garden's ruins. Enraged by the deaths of its brood, it takes its rage out on the four, chasing them across Manhattan in a taxi. They manage to trap Godzilla within the suspension cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, allowing the returning Air Force to strike it down with missiles. Godzilla collapses to the ground where the taxi is smashed under its jaw and slowly dies from its mortal wounds, and the remaining citizens and authorities celebrate. Audrey tells Kamen that she quits working for him after what he has done, before leaving with Nick. Philippe, taking a tape Animal was recording and promising to return it after removing certain contents, thanks Nick for his help and part ways. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Madison Square Garden, a single surviving egg hatches and the hatchling roars to life. American film producer and distributor Henry G. Saperstein, who had co-produced and distributed past Godzilla films for the American market through his studio UPA, received permission from Toho Co. Limited to pitch a new Godzilla film to Hollywood studios, stating, "For 10 years I pressured Toho to make one in America. Finally they agreed." Saperstein initially met with Sony Pictures producers Kerry Woods and Robert N. Fried for discussions regarding a live-action Mr. Magoo film, but the discussions led to the availability of the rights to Godzilla. Interested, Woods and Fried proposed the idea to Columbia Pictures, but were initially rejected. Woods stated, "We pitched the idea to Columbia and they passed outright. Their response was they felt it had the potential for Camp 18. The two also tried to pitch the idea to TriStar Pictures but were also shot down," Fried stated. TriStar did originally pass on the project. "The people who were running the studio at that particular time may not have seen commercial potential there, may not have thought that it would make a great film." Taking advice from his wife, Woods instead went over the executives' heads and proposed the idea to Peter Guber, the then chairman of the board and CEO of Sony Pictures. Guber became enthusiastic about the idea, seeing Godzilla as an international brand, and set the film up at TriStar. Woods recalled, "Peter got it. He saw the movie in his head. He was like, 'Godzilla? The fire-breathing monster?' Yes." TriStar Vice Chairman Ken Lamberger was sent to Tokyo to oversee the deal in obtaining the Godzilla rights from Toho in mid-1992. Sony's initial offer included a $300,000 a $400,000 advanced payment with an annual licensing fee for the Godzilla character, as well as production bonuses, exclusive distribution and merchandising rights for Japan, a profit percentage from international ticket sales and merchandising, usage rights to some of the monsters from the first 15 Godzilla films, and allow Toho to continue producing domestic Godzilla films while TriStar developed their film. Subsequently, Toho sent Sony a document of rules on how to treat Godzilla. Robert Fried stated, "They even sent me a 4-page, single-spaced memo describing the physical requirements the Godzilla in our film had to have. They're very protective." In October 1992, TriStar formally announced their acquisition of the rights to Godzilla from Toho to produce a trilogy of Godzilla films, with the promise of remaining true to the original series, cautioning against nuclear weapons and runaway technology. After TriStar's announcement, many of the original Godzilla filmmakers expressed support for the film. Haruo Nakajima, who portrayed Godzilla from 1954 to 1972, stated, "I'm pleased. I hope that a competition will spring up between Toho and TriStar." Koichi Kawakita, special effects director of the Heisei Godzilla films, stated, "I have great expectations. I'm looking forward to seeing it, not only because I direct special effects for Godzilla films but also because I am a movie fan." Teruyoshi Nakano, special effects director of the late Showa Godzilla films, stated, "I'm pleased that a new approach will be taken, and Ishiro Ring Honda, director of various Showa Godzilla films, stated, it will probably be much more interesting than the ones currently being produced in Japan." In 1994, Jan de Bont became attached to direct and began pre-production on the film for a 1996 summer release. De Bont's Godzilla would have discarded the character's atomic origin and replaced it with one wherein Godzilla is an artificial creation constructed by Atlanteans to defend humanity against a shape-shifting extraterrestrial monster called the Griffin. Stan Winston and his company were employed to do the effects for the film. Winston crafted sculptures of Godzilla and the Griffin. De Bont later left the project in December 1994 after TriStar refused to approve his budget of $120 million. He would later go on to direct Twister and Speed 2, Cruise Control. Clive Barker and Tim Burton were also in talks to potentially direct. In May 1993, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio were hired to write the screenplay. Prior to their hiring, Elliott and Rossio were searching for their next project and were offered Godzilla by their advisor Kerry Woods. The duo initially declined the offer several times. Elliott recalled, "We actually turned the project down about 2 or 3 times because we weren't sure we knew what to do with it." Woods eventually convinced them to discuss the project with TriStar. Elliott and Rossio wrote a 3.5-page story outline that secured their employment. Rossio believes that they were offered the project due to their experience in writing franchise-type titles. Robert Fried expressed support for Elliott and Rossio, praising them as talented sci-fi buffs and stating, "We've put a lot of time, thought and finance into the screenplay." Toho's character restrictions helped inspire Elliott and Rossio in finding the tone of the script. Elliott stated, "Toho insisted we not make light of the monster. That helped us find the right tone as well as the social and political implications." The duo wanted to avoid a comic-like approach and instead take the material seriously with a legitimate science fiction story that would evoke feelings of mystified or scared or awe-inspired for audiences. Rossio wanted to create a balance in anthropomorphizing Godzilla, not wanting to stray from Godzilla's humanistic personality but not humanize him entirely. The duo approached Godzilla as something that audiences would fear yet root for. Elliott found the key to the story after a friend, who was also a Godzilla fan, expressed that he found Godzilla not to be a good guy, but a territorial beast. Elliott stated, "And that, to me, meant that you could actually present Godzilla on the side of the angels but he could still be a monster." The duo chose to add small details to make Godzilla seem more realistic, such as the nictitating membrane. The duo took inspiration from Moby Dick for the story concept. As the story developed, they found that the Ahab archetype would be more interesting if it were a woman who lost her husband to Godzilla. Elliott described the story to be about obsession, redemption and inappropriate grief response. The duo also wanted to deliver a story that satisfied fans by adapting Godzilla's characterization from the first few Toho films. Elliott stated, "In one movie it does what the first 3 Toho films did. It takes him from being a horrendous threat to being defender of the Earth." Elliott and Rossio submitted their first draft on November 10, 1993. Woods and Fried were satisfied with the script, with Fried praising it for being respectful of the organic origins of Godzilla, in some ways a homage to US-Japanese relations. After DeBont joined the project, Elliott and Rossio revised the script based on his notes. Amongst the changes made to the first draft were the 12-year gap condensed to a year. Jill accompanies Keith to the Arctic site. Keith first notices Godzilla's teeth buried in eyes instead of his claws. The alien probe crashes in Traveler, Utah instead of Kentucky. Elliott and Rossio remained on the project after DeBont left and completed their final rewrites in spring 1995. Prior to hiring a new director, TriStar hired Don McPherson to rewrite the Elliott-Rossio script. Prior to his hiring, McPherson was working on Possession until he received a call from his agent with an offer to work on Godzilla. McPherson immediately accepted due to being a fan of the Toho Godzilla films. McPherson met with Mark Platt, the then president of TriStar, to discuss the film. The studio was concerned with the film's proposed $120 million budget, later revised to $200 million. DeBont insisted that all of the film's effects be entirely digital. McPherson noted, "The problem was that, in this version of the movie, it was all effects. Godzilla was in virtually every scene. So everything was an SFX scene." McPherson was tasked with rewriting the script to match TriStar's ideal budget of $80 million. Prior to rewriting the script, he requested to meet with the production crew to pinpoint which scenes were deemed the most expensive. The production crew reported that the 3 main problems that were considered difficult and costly were Godzilla's size, Godzilla's interaction with water, and Godzilla's interaction with masonry. McPherson was shown storyboards, concept art, and designs from DeBont's version. However, he did not keep these ideas in mind, feeling that such elements would change depending on the budget. Instead, McPherson used the Toho Godzilla design as a reference when rewriting the script. He noted that the project had transitioned into a film that turned directors away, stating, "They said they wanted strong, creative directors. But they wanted them as a kind of badge of creative excitement and had no intention of allowing them their freedom." While McPherson called Elliott and Rossio's original script terrific, he took issue with several of its ideas. He felt that the script discarded the Japanese element of post-war nuclear politics from the Toho films, leaving Godzilla as a threat to a single country rather than the world. McPherson added, that neglected the poetic aspect of fear and wonder from the original Toho movies, and the idea of a prior sin which had caused the mutation and revenge of Godzilla. He felt that the script lacked proper characters and had too many extra sequences which didn't deliver. He also took issue that the script never developed Godzilla as a character and treated him similar to the Terminator, though he suspected DeBont was responsible for this portrayal. McPherson felt that the script's depiction of Godzilla was relentless, noting, very much a Godzilla POV, so you neither identified with Godzilla nor with the scientists trying to protect the world. He also took issue that the first half of the script was driven by destruction and by the script's midpoint, there was monster fatigue and no encore, stating, so I thought the audience would be fatigued and ready for something new and the new thing wasn't delivered. McPherson attempted to resolve that issue while retaining the highlights of Elliott and Rossio's script. In November 2018, an unofficial digital graphic novel adaptation of Elliott and Rossio's unproduced Godzilla script was released online. Entitled Godzilla 94, the graphic novel features artwork by Todd Tennant, who worked with Rossio on the project. Prior to the release of Independence Day, director Roland Emmerich and producer Dean Devlin signed on to the project in May 1996 under the condition they would be able to handle the film their way. Devlin stated, I told Sony that I would do the film but on my own terms, with Godzilla as a fast-moving animal out of nature, rather than some strange kind of creature. Emmerich and Devlin were the first filmmakers approached by then TriStar executive Chris Lee to do Godzilla but initially turned the offer down. Devlin stated, both of us thought it was a dopey idea the first time we talked. When Chris came back to us, we still thought it was a dopey idea. Despite praising Elliott and Rossio's script, Emmerich discarded it, stating, it had some really cool things in it, but it is something I never would have done. The last half was like watching two creatures go at it. I simply don't like that. Emmerich instead decided to develop new ideas from scratch, stating, I didn't want to make the original Godzilla, I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to make my own. We took part of the original movie's basic storyline, in that the creature becomes created by radiation and it becomes a big challenge. But that's all we took. Then we asked ourselves what we would do today with a monster movie and a story like that. We forgot everything about the original Godzilla right there. Emmerich decided to completely reinvent Godzilla's design because he thought the original Toho design didn't make sense. Emmerich also discarded the previous design approved by Jan de Bont, stating, I saw the creature that they designed for TriStar's first attempt. Jan de Bont created a Godzilla that was very close to the original, but it was not right because today we wouldn't do it like that. Patrick Tatopoulos was hired by Emmerich to design Godzilla. According to Tatopoulos, the only specific instructions Emmerich gave him was that it should be able to run incredibly fast. Godzilla, originally conceived as a robust, erect-standing, plantigrade reptilian sea monster, was reimagined by Tatopoulos as a lean, digitigrade bipedal iguana-like creature that stood with its back and tail parallel to the ground. Godzilla's color scheme was designed to reflect and blend in with the urban environment. At one point, it was planned to use motion capture from a human to create the movements of the computer-generated Godzilla, but it ended up looking too much like a human in a suit. Tatopoulos thought the designs that Ricardo Delgado, Crash McCreary and Joey Orozco provided for Jan de Bont took the design in a wrong approach, stating, what they did which was a mistake in my mind was, rather than going in a new direction they tried to alter and make the old one better. And when you do that, first of all I think it's very disrespectful. It's more disrespectful for me to alter something existing than to take a fresh new direction. Tatopoulos took inspiration from the design of Shere Khan used in Disney's version of The Jungle Book in terms of Godzilla's chin, stating, one of the inspirations was a character I loved as a kid, the tiger in Jungle Book, Shere Khan. He had this great chin thing and I always loved it. He looked scary, evil, but you respected him. I thought, Let's try to give him a chin, and I felt it still looked realistic, but he had this different thing that you hadn't seen before. Totopoulos created 4 concept art pieces and a 2-foot-tall maquette for a meeting with Toho. Totopoulos and Emmerich attended the meeting to pitch their Godzilla to then Toho chairman Isao Matsuoka, Godzilla film producer Shigeru Tomiyama, and Godzilla special effects director Koichi Kawakita. They unveiled Totopoulos' artwork and maquette, and the Toho trio remained silent for a few minutes. Emmerich recalled, "They were speechless, they stared at it, and there was silence for a couple minutes, and then they said, 'Could you come back tomorrow?' I thought for sure we didn't have the movie then." Tomiyama later recalled that it was so different we realized we couldn't make small adjustments. That left the major question of whether to approve it or not. Even though Tomiyama was not allowed to remove the artwork and maquette from the studio premise, Tomiyama visited Godzilla producer and creator Tomoyuki Tanaka, whose failing health prevented him from attending the meeting, to explain Totopoulos' design, stating, "I told him, it's similar to Carl Lewis, with long legs, and it runs fast." The following morning, Matsuoka approved the design, stating that Totopoulos kept the spirit of Godzilla. Despite receiving approval from Toho, TriStar had yet to greenlight the film. Emmerich and Devlin wrote the script on spec, with the condition that the screenplay would return to the filmmakers if the studio did not immediately approve it. Emmerich and Devlin wrote the first draft in 5.5 weeks at Emmerich's vacation house in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Emmerich and Devlin decided to abandon the Atlantis origin established in Elliot and Rossio's script in favor of the radiation origin established in the Toho films, Devlin stated. In some of the early drafts of the script by others, they had Godzilla being an alien planted here. What Japan had originally come up with regarding nuclear radiation, you can't abandon that. It's too important to what Godzilla is all about. Emmerich and Devlin also decided to treat their Godzilla more animal-like than monstrous, Totopoulos stated. "We were creating an animal. We weren't creating a monster." Emmerich and Devlin also decided to give their Godzilla the ability to burrow underground, Devlin stated. "We discovered that certain kinds of lizards can burrow, so we decided to give him that capability." Chameleon-like skin change was also considered but abandoned later during production. Emmerich and Devlin also abandoned Godzilla's iconic atomic breath in favor of a power breath, where their Godzilla would simply blow objects away by exhaling a strong wind-like breath. However, news of the power breath leaked before the film's release, which outraged fans and forced Emmerich and Devlin to make last-minute changes on scenes involving the power breath. Effects supervisor Volker Engel stated, "Dean and Roland wanted this monster to retain a certain menace and credibility, but Godzilla's breath is something everyone expects to see at some point, so they came up with instances in which you would see something like the old breath, but with a kind of logic applied to it. We make the assumption that something in his breath, when it comes in contact with flame, causes combustive ignition. So you get this flamethrower effect, which causes everything to ignite. As a way to make their Godzilla a threat to mankind, Emmerich and Devlin also gave their Godzilla the ability to lay hundreds of eggs, via parthenogenesis, and rapidly spawn offspring that could spawn offspring of their own and quickly overrun the planet. The first draft was submitted to Sony on December 19, 1996. Then President of Sony Pictures John Calley forwarded the script to Bob Levin of marketing to brainstorm marketing ideas. TriStar greenlit the film soon after Emmerich and Devlin's completion of the first draft, bestowing complete creative freedom to write, produce, and direct on the filmmakers, while the studio managed financing, distribution and merchandising deals. The deal also enabled Emmerich and Devlin to receive 15% first-dollar gross on the film, while the original producers Kerry Woods and Robert Fried would be given executive producer credits. Instead of employing Digital Domain as Jan de Bond planned for his Godzilla, Emmerich and Devlin decided to use their own effects teams, such as Volker Engel as the film's visual effects supervisor, Joe Vicosil as miniature effects supervisor, Clay Pinney as mechanical effects supervisor, and William Fay as executive producer of the team. Viewpoint Data Labs created a digital model of Godzilla, nicknamed Fred, for scenes that required a digital rendition of the monster. For scenes that required practical effects, Titapulo's studio created a 60th scale animatronic model of Godzilla's upper body as well as a 24th scale Godzilla suit donned by stuntman Kurt Carley. The filmmakers favored CG over practical effects, and as a result, the final film features 400 digital shots, 185 of which feature Godzilla, and only 24 practical effects used in the final film. Principal photography began on May 1, 1997 and wrapped on September 26, 1997. Filming took place in New York City and moved to Los Angeles in June. Scenes in New York were filmed in 13 days. Tropical scenes were filmed in the Hawaiian Islands. The United States Marine Corps participated in the filming of the movie. An F-18 Marine Reserve pilot, Col. Dwight Schmidt, actually piloted the plane that fired the missiles that killed Godzilla. The soundtrack, featuring alternative rock music, was released on May 19, 1998, by Epic Records. It was a success on the music charts, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and was certified platinum on June 22, 1998. The original score was composed by David Arnold. The film's score was not released on CD until 9 years later, when it went on sale as a complete original film score in 2007 by La La Land Records. The album was supported by the single Come With Me performed by Sean Combs and Jimmy Page. Bob Levin, chief of marketing for the film, was caught by surprise when Emmerich insisted not to use full-body images or headshots of Godzilla during the marketing. Levine stated, "We got indications from them that they really didn't think that the full-figure Godzilla should be at all exposed prior to the release of the film. While initially we reacted negatively to that, once we understood their thinking behind it, it became completely acceptable to us." 300 companies signed an agreement not to show the full image of Godzilla before the film's release. Prior to principal photography, Emmerich filmed a teaser trailer, budgeted at $600,000, that featured Godzilla's foot crushing the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex at a museum. The trailer was attached to screenings of Men in Black and received an overwhelmingly enthusiastic response from audiences. Afterwards, select theaters began advertising that the trailer would be featured before Men in Black. A new trailer later premiered on November 7, 1997, with the release of Starship Troopers. I will talk about Godzilla 2000 in the next video, so see you next time.